Daenerys Targaryen stood on the wind-buffeted parapets of Dragonstone, eyes fixed on the roiling sea. The sun dipped low in the west, painting the horizon with streaks of ochre and fading gold. Gone were the days when she had lingered on the edge of this fortress alone, plotting her first landing in Westeros. Now she had secured far more than a foothold. She had torn the Lannisters from the seat of power, and she had dismantled the Iron Throne itself, if only by accident of war. Yet as she watched the waves surge against black volcanic rock, she felt no rush of triumph. The realm she had longed to liberate was fractured and uncertain, and new threats loomed like dark clouds beyond any known horizon. Jon Snow, Aegon Targaryen, stood a short distance behind her, leaning against the carved stone merlons, his dark hair whipped by gusts of briny wind. The two of them had chosen Dragonstone as their provisional seat, leaving King's Landing under a caretaker's rule while reconstruction continued. Word had begun to spread that the royal pair's decision to depart the capital had signaled a more measured, less domineering approach to governance. Some in the city whispered they had run from responsibility, but others spoke of relief that the monstrous black dragon, Umbrax, had taken its unsettling presence away from King's Landing's walls. At length, Daenerys turned to Jon, her silver hair lifting in a strong breeze. "It's quieter here," she said softly. "Too quiet, perhaps." Jon nodded. A gull circled overhead, cawing before vanishing into the gloom. "Quieter, yes, but we shouldn't let that lull us. The realm is raw. Every raven we receive from King's Landing speaks of small riots, theft, remnants of Lannister loyalists forming pockets of resistance." He paused, mouth quirking. "At least with Ser Ryman Celtigar as provisional governor, there's no risk of him pursuing a crown of his own. He's too old for ambition, but the city itself is a tinderbox." "We'll need to return soon," Daenerys said. "We gave them space to breathe, but we can't allow chaos. Tyrion's letters say some guild leaders are petitioning for lower taxes. Others want more coin to rebuild. The city's finances are precarious." Jon blew out a breath. "We might need more than coin. Davos reported that the harvest from the Reach will be abundant, but not enough to feed all of King's Landing if winter lingers long. The Riverlands might help, if the lords there can be convinced. They still have little love for Lannisters, but they're wary of Targaryens, too." Daenerys turned back to the sea. "I remember how the freed cities of Essos required me to tread carefully, forming councils so they would not see me as a conqueror. Here, we try the same, but the memory of my father and brother, of past Targaryens, lingers like a dark stain. The same can be said for you, although the North sees you as a Stark. The rest see you as a Targaryen with the mightiest dragon in living memory." Jon inclined his head, feeling the weight of that truth. "Umbrax is part of the reason half the realm hesitates to move against us. Fear is a powerful deterrent, but fear alone can't build a stable realm." She met his gaze. "We'll find a path. Let them see we're more than dragons and war. We have people's welfare at heart. That is why we left the city to breathe. Let them see we do not seek to rule with an iron fist." She paused, crossing her arms against the chill. "But we must be watchful. Bran's visions trouble me." Jon's face darkened with worry. "I haven't yet told you all of it. He came to me in a dream. Well, it was not quite a dream. He stood outside my chambers the other night, silent, as if he wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. I woke to see him there. I asked what he needed. He said only, 'The red tide moves in Essos. Old shapes in the desert stir.' Then he left." Jon gave a helpless shrug. "I don't know what it means. He rarely clarifies unless we push him." Daenerys let out a weary breath. "He's the three-eyed raven. He sees these possible futures as fragments. If only we had a clearer sign. Lawler, the Red Priest's shadows in the far east. The world is wide, and we have enough to handle in Westeros." Her voice dropped to a murmur. "I had hoped that defeating the Night King and unseating Cersei might grant us peace. But it seems we'll never stop putting out fires." Jon stepped forward, resting a hand lightly on her shoulder. "We'll manage, one day at a time. If a threat emerges from Essos, we'll face it. She offered a faint, grateful smile. They lingered in silence, listening to the sea's unending crash. Below in the courtyard, Umbrax dozed near the old stone steps, his wings folded tight, colossal head resting on forepaws. Drogon perched atop a crooked tower, scanning the water with idle curiosity. Rhaegal nested on a lower parapet, still favoring his previously wounded shoulder but largely healed. The fortress felt claustrophobic at times, the dragons overshadowing the smaller courtyard. But no location in Westeros could accommodate 3 dragons more comfortably than Dragonstone. Apart from the open fields near King's Landing, which no one found appealing now, a messenger arrived in the courtyard below, and within minutes, the man was escorted up the steps to the outer wall. He bowed low before Daenerys and Jon, breathless from the climb and the swirling wind. He held out a sealed parchment. The wax bore the imprint of a falcon's wings, the seal of the Vale. Jon accepted the letter, scanning its contents. A furrow deepened in his brow. Lord Royce writes that they've uncovered a small ring of conspirators near the Bloody Gate. They plan to smuggle arms to certain lords in the Crownlands who still call themselves Lannister men. The shipments were hidden. Royce, with the help of local scouts, seized them, but the conspirators claim they answered to an unnamed figure with influence in Essos. Jon's fingers tightened on the letter. No direct mention of Euron Greyjoy, but it's suspicious. Daenerys listened intently. So attempts to rearm a Lannister loyalist faction are coming from across the sea? It seems so. The conspirators didn't name anyone specific, but they spoke of gold from a source in Volantis or near it. Jon looked up, meeting her eyes. Could be Euron. Could be that Red Priestess Bran alluded to, or someone else entirely. We cannot ignore it. Daenerys's jaw set. We'll respond. Send word to Lord Royce that he has our support in quashing such plots. In the meantime, we must redouble efforts to secure the Crownlands and the harbors. If gold or arms flow in from Essos, we'll need a watchful navy. The Iron Fleet was destroyed, but Euron may have assembled a new band of pirates. Jon nodded and dismissed the messenger, who hurried back down the steps. The 2 rulers exchanged weary glances. Another problem added to an already long list. Yet, in a way, the knowledge of a potential external threat galvanized them. Daenerys turned from the sea. We should hold council. We need to plan for a full network of watchers along the coast. Yara Greyjoy promised to keep the Iron Islands loyal, but if Euron resurfaces with men and ships, we'll need more than just Yara's handful to contain him. Jon agreed. They retreated inside, leaving the windy parapet for the warmth of the Great Hall of Dragonstone. A large black table dominated the space, carved in the shape of Westeros, an artifact from centuries earlier when Aegon the Conqueror had plotted his invasion. Torches flickered against walls decorated with carved dragon shapes. Several of Daenerys's trusted advisors waited there, including Missandei's replacement, an Essosi scribe named Elo, recommended by the men of Meereen. Elo was quiet, studious, and respectful, keen to prove worthy as Daenerys's new interpreter and record-keeper. Grey Worm stood with arms folded, the stoic commander of the unsullied Seldom leaving Daenerys's side. Jorah Mormont had perished in the Great War. Ser Barristan Selmy was long gone. There were so few older pillars of Daenerys's court left. Yet a handful of Westerosi knights who had bent the knee after the downfall of King's Landing were present, along with a few Stormlanders dispatched by Gendry as a sign of goodwill. Jon's supporters were fewer in number. He had brought some loyal Northmen, but the bulk remained in Winterfell under Sansa's governance. The free folk found themselves adrift in the south, many yearning to return north. Only Tormund and a small band had lingered to help. Tormund was not present in the hall at the moment. He was likely outside cursing the salt wind or regaling the soldiers with outlandish tales. Bran was absent, having chosen to stay in King's Landing to keep watch with Arya. Davos was in the Reach, Tyrion in the capital. So the council was a smaller circle than one might have expected from a monarchy that united Targaryen and Stark lines. Daenerys and Jon explained the letter from Lord Royce, the continuing rumors of an Essosi-funded conspiracy, and the possibility of Euron Greyjoy's involvement. Grey Worm's face remained impassive, but his eyes narrowed at the mention of new enemies. He recalled the losses the Unsullied had endured in the Great War and subsequent conflicts. Enough men had died, and he would not let more fall prey to foreign sellswords. We can station additional Unsullied detachments at Blackwater Bay and at any harbor suspected of smuggling, Grey Worm said, voice flat. But we have fewer troops than we once did. We must choose our vantage points carefully. The Crown's coin is finite, so we cannot post large garrisons everywhere. A Stormlander knight, Ser Beric Morrigan, no relation to the late Beric Dondarrion, spoke up. My lady, my lord, we might consider forging a new fleet. If the Lannisters had not drained the treasury, and if the city was not half ruined, we could attempt to build warships. But it's still possible to start small. Dragonstone's shipyard is in disrepair, but the cove could hold a modest navy if we spent the coin. Daenerys considered. A navy is valuable, but as you said, the coin is limited. We do not wish to weigh the people down with heavier taxes after so much war. Some measure is needed, though. I refuse to let pirates, rebels, or foreign conspirators roam at will. Let's weigh the costs carefully. Jon glanced at the carved map table, eyes settling on the swirling cluster of small islands near the southwestern coast. We should also contact House Redwine. They have a proud maritime tradition. If they remain loyal, we could secure more ships from the Arbor. But that depends on their willingness to cooperate with us as Targaryen rulers. They might prefer independence or alliances with other wine-trading powers. Daenerys nodded. Then we must send envoys, make it clear we want peaceful cooperation. They're welcome to trade in King's Landing if they help ensure the seas are safe. She paused, gazing around the table. We will also keep in close contact with Yara Greyjoy. If Euron resurfaces, she can strike. She's sworn loyalty to me, though the Ironborn are, by nature, restless and proud. Grey Worm folded his arms. We can manage that. We only need to be swift if Euron tries to rally the scattered Ironborn. I will send scouts along the coast at once. The meeting continued, delving into practical details. How to supply the Watchers, how to coordinate with King's Landing for funds, and how to keep morale high among the soldiers. Jon insisted on drafting letters to the major ports along Westeros' southern coast, Oldtown, Lannisport, even smaller harbors along the reach of the Sunset Sea, warning them about possible smuggling operations or pirate threats. Each letter carried the seal of both Targaryen and Stark, underscoring that the monarchy was united. When the council concluded, Daenerys sat for a moment, chin propped on her hand, staring at the map of Westeros carved into the table. So many times she had studied it, imagining her conquest. Now, she was no conqueror brandishing absolute force, but a caretaker trying to stitch a wounded realm back together. Jon sat beside her, reading a raven's note from Sansa. A fresh missive describing the North's harvest struggles and the tension between those who wanted full independence versus those who believed that a Targaryen alliance was best for prosperity. She says the North is still loyal, mostly, Jon murmured. But some resent that we remain in the South, tending to southern quarrels while the North recovers from the White Walker invasion. They want me to return as king in the North, or at least reassure them personally. Sansa does what she can, but I'm still the one they chose before they learned of my parentage. Daenerys didn't flinch, though the mention of the North's independence always pricked at her. She had started out wanting all of Westeros united under her rightful claim, but the war had changed her perspective. We can journey north after we settle some of these looming threats, she offered. Show them that I'm not an enemy of the North, and you can speak to them as well. Sometimes seeing is believing. Jon smiled faintly. Yes, I'd like that. I miss Winterfell's quiet, though after all that's happened, I'm not sure it's truly quiet anymore. The memory of the dead lingers. She reached for his hand, intertwining their fingers. We'll face that too, step by step. They left the War Council table behind and made their way through shadowy corridors to the outer courtyard. Evening shadows stretched across the courtyard as they passed Umbrax, who stirred slightly, sensing their presence. The huge dragon raised his head, golden eyes glinting. At that, Drogon rumbled from his perch. The interplay between the dragons had settled into a wary equilibrium. Drogon remained bonded to Daenerys, Rhaegal followed Drogon's lead, and Umbrax, though older and mightier, seemed content so long as Jon was near. The fortress occasionally shuddered with their movements. Daenerys suspected that the stonemasons who built Dragonstone never expected it to hold dragons of such combined scale. Jon parted ways with Daenerys after a time, heading for a secluded walkway that overlooked the sea. He needed a moment to breathe, away from courtly talk. Ghost padded behind him, the pale direwolf oddly at home in the salt-scented wind. Jon stroked the wolf's thick fur, gazing out at the open horizon. The sense of responsibility weighed on him, but at least he had allies he could trust. He remembered the many nights alone at Castle Black, uncertain if the Night's Watch would accept him, if the North would stand behind him. Now the burden was heavier, yet he was no longer alone. The realm might have new enemies, but it also had new opportunities. If only the darkest rumors from Essos would prove false. He exhaled, letting the wind carry his tension. The sun disappeared, leaving only a faint orange line on the horizon. The gloom of night settled, star by star. Tomorrow, more tasks awaited, more letters, more decisions. Perhaps a time would come when the realm no longer teetered on the brink of calamity. He could only hope. In the morning, a small ship arrived in Dragonstone's Cove, a battered merchant vessel bearing a single passenger who carried an urgent message from King's Landing. The castle guards, uncertain who the visitor might be, approached warily. The passenger, a short man with a scruffy beard and ink-stained fingers, claimed he was from the Citadel in Old Town, carrying records for the new monarchy's librarians and maesters. But he also bore a sealed letter from Tyrion Lannister. Once the authenticity was confirmed, the man was escorted up to meet Daenerys and Jon in the courtyard. He bowed deeply, then handed over the letter. Daenerys broke the seal. Tyrion's handwriting sprawled across the page, full of agitation. "Your Graces, I hope this finds you well. We have a situation in King's Landing. A group of local magistrates from the Crownlands has demanded an audience, claiming partial ownership of certain lands that once belonged to the Targaryens before Robert's rebellion. They are led by a minor lord named Giles Bywater, who insists on reclaiming farmland near Rosby. He claims a distant kinship with House Targaryen and that the land was illegally seized by Aerys's enemies. It sounds like nonsense, but the man has rallied a surprising number of small folk who want new land grants. If I refuse them outright, they might incite chaos. If I give in, we may anger other lords who hold deeds dating back to the rebellion. Meanwhile, the crown's coffers remain low. We have stabilized the city somewhat, but the new watchers along the coast require funding. We will need to raise taxes or find alternative revenue soon, or risk failing to pay the soldiers. Already there are rumors that some men have not received wages in weeks. Worse, the Dorne delegation grows impatient. Lady Nemella, who arrived to see the new monarchy, demands assurances about the border with the Stormlands, about trade routes, and about certain hostages from the Sand family who remain in captivity. I cannot resolve this alone. The city begs for your presence. On a less formal note, I suspect some unspoken tension among the small council. Governor Celtigar is aging and cautious to the point of paralysis. My own name still elicits hostility whenever Lannister gold is mentioned. We have done our best, but I fear the city yearns for a show of unity and strength from their rulers, or we risk letting petty disputes fester. Come soon, if possible. Tyrion. Daenerys set down the letter with a sigh. We leave the city for a few weeks, and the entire realm clamors for help. Jon scanned the page. Land disputes, finances, Dorne's demands, soldiers unpaid. All those can lead to bigger troubles. Tyrion's right. We might need to return to King's Landing sooner than we planned. He flicked his gaze at Daenerys. You said you wanted to give them breathing room, but perhaps we gave them too much. They still see themselves as beholden to one central power, and without a stable monarchy present, they flail. She nodded. We must go. Let's assemble a small retinue. We'll not bring the entire garrison from Dragonstone. Enough to show presence, but not enough to drain the fortress's defenses. I want to speak with this Lord Bywater who claims Targaryen kinship, see if he's a charlatan or if he has legitimate grievances. And we must appease the Dornish. It's time we show we're serious about forging alliances that aren't forced by the sword. They wasted no time. Within a day, Daenerys and Jon prepared to depart. Grey Worm selected 100 Unsullied to sail with them, plus a small group of knights for ceremony. The rest would remain behind to maintain the Watchers along the coast. Rhaegal, still healing, would stay at Dragonstone under watch by a few stable hands who had trained with dragons. Drogon and Umbrax would accompany the royal pair, but only if they could be safely stabled outside the city gates. The notion of Umbrax perched in the rubble of the Red Keep again might unnerve the small folk. So the plan was to let Umbrax and Drogon rest in the fields north of the city, under a watchful guard, to avoid overshadowing the city with the threat of instant dragonfire. They departed on a crisp morning, with a strong wind that favored their sails. Daenerys took the royal galley, flanked by 2 smaller ships carrying Unsullied, knights, and supplies. Jon, though he was no seasoned mariner, stood beside her on the prow, gazing toward the watery horizon. Drogon and Umbrax flew overhead at intervals, the monstrous shape of Umbrax occasionally casting the entire galley in shadow. The sailors shuddered whenever that black shape passed, remembering old stories about Balerian's might. The journey was uneventful, but news traveled faster than ships. By the time they neared the Blackwater Rush, a cluster of small fishing vessels and merchant craft scattered at the sight of dragons overhead. A few braver or foolish captains guided their ships closer, waving to the Targaryen standard flapping from the masts. Daenerys and Jon took it as a sign that not everyone in the Crownlands was terrified. Some seemed almost eager, hoping the monarchy would restore stability to trade routes. When they rounded the final bend of the river and King's Landing hove into view, the midday sun revealed that the city's skyline was still marked by the jagged ruin of the Red Keep's upper towers. Smoke no longer drifted from those collapsed spires, but scaffolding rose around them, as if an attempt was underway to salvage or rebuild. The walls, scorched in places, bore fresh Targaryen banners. At the main harbor, a throng of onlookers gathered to watch the royal ships dock, presumably alerted by ravens of the monarchy's impending arrival. Daenerys and Jon disembarked amid a swirl of activity. The city's new steward, Ser Ryman Celtigar, tottered forward with a small honor guard to greet them. Tyrion appeared too, descending from a waiting carriage with obvious relief on his face. Nearby, a handful of Dornish lords and ladies in bright silk watched from a distance, along with retinues from the Crownlands. Overhead, Drogon and Umbrax circled once, roared to mark their presence, and then veered off to land north of the city, accompanied by a small outrider party. The thunder of their wings rattled the harbor, reminding everyone that Targaryen might remain very real. Ser Ryman bowed stiffly. "Your Graces, it is an honor to see you returned. The city is," he cleared his throat, "much the same as when you left, though tensions run high in certain quarters." Daenerys offered a polite nod. "Thank you for your service, Ser Ryman. We'll see to the city's troubles. Has Tyrion kept you informed of our dispatches regarding the Watchers on the coast?" Ser Ryman nodded, relief flickering in his eyes. "Yes, we've received them and done our best to send what coin we can. But the treasury is low. I've already had to halt some of the repairs to the outer wards to pay the Watchers. We are short of funds." He trailed off uneasy. Daenerys suppressed a sigh and turned to Tyrion. "Then we'll solve that as well. We have quite a list to address, I understand." Tyrion bowed ironically. "Indeed, Your Grace. If you will accompany me, the governor's offices, what remains of them, have been set up in a portion of the keep that's still intact. We can speak more comfortably, away from the harbor's noise." They made their way through the city streets, flanked by Unsullied in their distinctive armor. The onlookers parted, some bowing, others standing warily. A few called out thanks or requests for help. Jon noticed children peering around corners, wide-eyed at the retinue's passage. The city smelled of fish, sweat, and stale smoke, but less so than before. The air was also warmer. Summer's tail lingered, though no one knew if winter might return with a vengeance. The route led them up a winding road toward the Red Keep's lower gates. Once they passed the battered portcullis, it was clear repairs had begun in earnest. Wooden scaffolds crisscrossed near collapsed towers, workers hammered at broken masonry, and stonemasons barked instructions. In the courtyard, rubble piles had shrunk, much of the debris cleared away. Daenerys noted a portion of the keep's outer wall had been stabilized with new stone. Yet the throne room's highest spire remained a jagged ruin, open to the sky, where Cersei and the mountain had once made their final stand. They followed Tyrion into an annex behind the old Great Hall, where a wide corridor still had intact walls. There, a set of smaller chambers had been converted into offices. The dusty tapestries of old Targaryen kings hung crookedly, saved from the fires. In a primary room, a rough-hewn table stood, laden with parchments, ink, and quills. Tyrion gestured for Daenerys, Jon, and the senior advisors to sit. Guards posted themselves at the door, and soon the small council reformed, with Governor Celtigar, Tyrion, and a few others present. Tyrion wasted no time. "Let me begin with the most pressing matter, soldiers' pay. We do not have enough coin to meet the payroll for all watchers, the unsullied in the city, and the local city watch. Some portion must be found, either from taxes or borrowed from the Iron Bank. The city's trade is only just recovering, so tax revenues remain low. The Iron Bank is always happy to lend, but we know how dangerous that can be if we fail to repay them." Daenerys's brow furrowed. Borrowing from the Iron Bank could chain the realm to Braavos's whims. "I'd rather not, but perhaps we have no choice. Unless we lighten the Watcher's presence or raise taxes, both risk trouble." Celtigar cleared his throat. "We might negotiate with wealthy lords for loans, in exchange for future favors, land, titles, or other considerations. But that, too, is a perilous path." Jon asked, "Is there any immediate source of revenue we might have overlooked? Seized Lannister assets, unclaimed gold from Casterly Rock, or the spoils of old Tyrell gold shipments?" Tyrion shook his head. "Cersei squandered much of the Lannister wealth on the Golden Company. What remains at Casterly Rock is uncertain. I haven't set foot there in years. The mines are said to be nearly empty. We could dispatch an envoy to see if anything remains, but I wouldn't count on it. The Tyrell gold was mostly stolen by the Crown after the fall of Highgarden, and I doubt we'll find more lying around unclaimed." Daenerys exhaled. "Then we might have to consider a moderate tax increase on trade, just enough to cover shortfalls. Perhaps a war tax, though that term might rankle people after so many wars. Or we risk losing control of the Watchers. If soldiers go unpaid, desertions and corruption follow." Tyrion nodded. "We can rename it something softer, reconstruction duty or a harbor levy. Something that makes the people believe it's for their own good. But we must ensure trade doesn't stall." They agreed to draft a new harbor levy, modest enough not to strangle commerce but sufficient to pay the Watchers. Tyrion would coordinate with the harbor masters, while Ser Ryman set up a transparent accounting system so the people would see that coin was used for the Watchers and not some royal indulgence. It was not ideal, but it might avert immediate crisis. Next came the matter of Lord Giles Bywater and his rumored claim to Targaryen farmland. Tyrion explained that Bywater had genealogical records supposedly proving a distant link to some lesser Targaryen line from the days of King Jaehaerys. It was possible his ancestry was legitimate or it could be forged. Bywater demanded restitution of lands near Rosby, farmland seized during Robert's rebellion. But House Rosby itself contested this fiercely. If Daenerys intervened on Bywater's side without proof, other lords would fear random redistributions of land. Daenerys frowned. "Summon Lord Bywater and House Rosby's representative. We'll hold an audience, examine his proof, and make a fair ruling. I won't hand out farmland merely because someone claims Targaryen blood. We are not looking to uproot established lords without just cause." Jon concurred, noting that in the north, land disputes often led to feuds lasting generations. "We have to tread carefully." They moved on to Dorne's delegation, which Tyrion introduced. Lady Nymella, a tall, raven-haired woman wearing embroidered silks of red and gold. She approached with a bow. Behind her stood two men in lighter clothing, bearing spears decorated with sun and spear sigils. Tyrion explained that Lady Nymella claimed a loose connection to the ruling line that had perished under House Martell's downfall and the subsequent war. Now she styled herself Voice of Dorne. Though some in that region contested her leadership, Daenerys inclined her head. "My lady, welcome. We regret keeping you waiting. The realm is large, and we only just returned." Nymella's voice was calm but carried an undercurrent of tension. "We understand, Your Grace. Dorne has maintained a stance of partial independence for centuries. We cooperated with the Seven Kingdoms in limited ways, until the wars took everything from us. Many of our leading families were gutted by the Lannisters. We come to see if your rule will bring an end to that tyranny or replace it with another." Daenerys raised her chin. "We do not seek to tyrannize Dorne. We desire alliances built on respect. Tell us your demands." Nymella hesitated. "We want the safe return of several nobles captured under Cersei's regime. If they still live, we want them freed. We wish to ensure that no further taxes are imposed on Dornish caravans traveling north. The Dornish trade routes must be open. Finally, we wish to maintain our tradition of self-governance, as we did under the Martells, recognized by the Crown. That means a measure of autonomy in local law." Tyrion tapped his fingers on the table, addressing Daenerys in a quieter tone. "We do hold some hostages in the city dungeons, mostly minor lords who were taken under suspicion of plotting with the Sand Snakes. If their crimes weren't severe, we can release them as a gesture of goodwill. As for the taxes, that's trickier, but perhaps we can reduce or waive them for a time to bolster trade with Dorne." Daenerys turned to Nymella. "We will investigate the prisoners. If they have committed grave crimes, like murdering the innocent, I cannot simply free them without justice. But if they are merely political detainees, I see no reason to keep them. Consider that done, pending a review." Jon spoke next. "Dorne's trade is valuable, especially if we want the realm to prosper. We can reduce overland taxes for a set period, say 2 years, to help Dorne rebuild. In return, we ask that Dorne not sponsor any armed rebellion, nor harbor those who would undermine our rule. We must have stability." Nymella pursed her lips. "That is acceptable if you uphold your word. But you must understand. Many Dornishmen still harbor resentment over Elia Martell's fate, and over the atrocities committed by the Lannisters and their allies. You hold the city where those crimes were plotted and carried out." Daenerys's voice grew gentler. "I understand. The Lannisters are no longer in power. We destroyed their hold. If Dorne wishes for vengeance, it's best directed at the few Lannister loyalists who remain, not at us. We are prepared to support justice, so long as it does not lead to renewed bloodshed among innocents." Nymella studied Daenerys's face. "Very well. My supporters in Dorne will be pleased to see a Targaryen on the throne again, if you live up to your words." She bowed. "I will remain here to finalize the details of this arrangement. Then I will return to Sunspear, or what remains of it, to rally the scattered lords. We may also send a delegation to your proposed Great Council, if that truly takes shape." With that, the initial meeting ended on a guardedly positive note. Daenerys and Jon felt relief that at least the Dornish demands were not outright rebellious. Nymella seemed pragmatic, not eager for war. Tyrion promised to expedite the prisoner review, while Lady Nymella's men remained in the city as her retinue. Throughout the afternoon, a steady stream of lesser petitioners arrived with complaints or requests, some wanting recompense for burned property, others seeking lost relatives or small pardons for petty crimes. Jon listened patiently, delegating where needed. Daenerys found the repetition wearying, but she forced herself to remain gracious. This was the reality of ruling, unending details that shaped daily life. By nightfall, they retired to simpler quarters than the ruined royal apartments. A side wing of the Red Keep had been refurbished with plain but functional rooms. Daenerys and Jon each had a separate chamber, though the corridor's hush made their footsteps echo. Candles cast a flickering glow on stone walls. Unsullied patrolled the hall, watchful. The ghosts of the war still haunted the keep, and few felt at ease within those scorched corridors. Daenerys, exhausted, reclined in a chair by her chamber's shuttered window. She held a goblet of watered wine, staring at the swirl of shadows cast by the torch outside the door. The day's negotiations whirled in her mind. Finances, feuds, demands from Dorne, land disputes, the risk of associate conspiracies. She heard a soft knock, then Jon entered quietly, wearing a simple tunic and breeches. Ghost padded in behind him, sniffing at the corners. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. She gestured to a second chair. "Of course." He settled across from her, letting a silence stretch. Beyond the window, the city murmured, distant calls, the rattle of carts. At length, Jon spoke. "Is this what you pictured years ago, when you dreamed of retaking King's Landing?" A faint, wry laugh escaped her. "No, I imagined triumph, adoration, the Iron Throne beneath me. Now the throne is gone, the keep half in ruins, the people uncertain whether to cheer or flee. We hold power, but it feels precarious. Yet I can't say I regret the path we took. We saved the city from a worse fate." Jon nodded, reflecting on what Bran had said about alternate futures. "Indeed, we saw enough destruction under Cersei. If we had been more ruthless, we might have united the realm through fear, but it wouldn't have lasted. I'd rather do it this way." She sipped her wine. "Bran said the future was altered, but new threats stir. At least we have some measure of choice now. We can build a realm that's not bound to cycles of tyranny. If only the realm will let us." He studied her face. "They will, in time, if we stay the course. You once spoke of breaking the wheel. Perhaps it's not as simple as taking the throne. It's forging a new shape for Westeros. That might mean these daily negotiations, this balancing act. The realm is large, complicated. But you and I, together, might do what no one else could." She reached out, slipping her hand into his. The warmth of that gesture soothed the day's tension a little. "We still have much to discuss," she said gently. "About us, our families, our blood. We said we'd wait, but the question remains. Would a formal union unite the realm?" Jon's mouth tightened. "Tyrion suggested marriage. Others will too. Some might demand it. They see two Targaryens, each with a claim. For them, the simplest solution is to merge those claims. But the idea of openly proclaiming our relationship as lovers and also aunt-nephew. Some lords might recoil, while others might accept it as Targaryen tradition." Daenerys lowered her gaze. "The old Targaryens wed brother to sister for centuries. But that was long ago. Even I question it, especially after all the realm has endured from Targaryen madness." She inhaled slowly. "Perhaps it doesn't matter. We can rule side by side without marriage. But I can't deny part of me wonders if it would bring clarity." Jon let out a quiet breath. "We don't have to decide tonight. For now, let them see we stand united in purpose. They can believe what they will about the nature of our bond. Right now, I'm content to share this moment with you, away from prying eyes." She gave a small smile and nodded, content to leave the issue unresolved. The tension around them softened, replaced by a fragile peace. Ghost settled near the hearth, panting quietly. They spoke in low tones of simpler things, old memories, the quiet at Dragonstone, even a fleeting jest about Tormund's antics. For a moment, they were not rulers, only two people who had endured heartbreak and found a measure of solace in each other. Come dawn, they rose to face another day of rulership. Daenerys held a public audience in a partially repaired hall that once belonged to the Master of Laws, a chamber large enough for crowds but not as grand as the old throne room. Rows of benches lined either side, with a narrow aisle down the middle. Jon stood at her left, Tyrion at her right, Grey Worm near the dais. Guards posted at every door. The Dornish delegation arrived to watch as well. Lord Giles Bywater was ushered in. A tall, gaunt man with watery blue eyes and a thin mustache. He wore a faded surcoat in black and silver. He bowed stiffly. Behind him came two advisors carrying scrolls. Opposite him stood a representative of House Rosby, a middle-aged knight in green livery. The dispute began with polite recitations of lineage. Bywater claimed that in the days of King Jaehaerys, a certain Targaryen princeling had sired a bastard who later married into the Bywater line. The Rosby Knight insisted that was a legend, no more, and that House Rosby's ownership of certain farmlands had been recognized for generations. The argument grew heated, with Bywater insisting his Targaryen blood gave him a right to petition Daenerys for redress. Daenerys listened impassively, occasionally glancing at Tyrion for his counsel. Tyrion eventually stepped in. "We require proof, my lord. If you have official records or recognized genealogies from the Citadel, present them. Otherwise, it's rumor." Bywater's advisors unrolled old parchments, crackling with age. They bore genealogical lines, but many were written in archaic script. One excerpt mentioned a scion of House Targaryen who dwelt near Rosby, fathering baseborn children. It lacked an official seal from the Citadel, though. Daenerys flicked a glance at Jon, who said quietly, "Do we have any living maester or archivist who can authenticate this?" A meager shuffle brought forth a maester from the keep's library, who studied the parchment. After some hemming and hawing, he confessed he could not verify its authenticity without more thorough research. The Rosby Knight declared it a forgery. Bywater grew red-faced with indignation, accusing House Rosby of seizing the land illegally after Robert's rebellion. Daenerys raised a hand to silence them. "I am the last living daughter of King Aerys," she said, voice echoing in the hall. "My word on Targaryen matters is final, but I will not tear land away from House Rosby without iron-proof evidence. If you wish, Lord Bywater, I can offer an alternative. A hearing with an impartial Citadel panel. If they find your genealogical claims valid, we will consider compensation. But the farmland remains with House Rosby for now." Bywater spluttered. "But, Your Grace," she cut him off gently. "This is a realm of law, not arbitrary whims. Prove your claim beyond rumor, and we will speak again. I do not deny the possibility, but mere rumor is insufficient." Her eyes flicked to the Rosby Knight. "You remain the legal steward of that land, under the Crown's authority. However, if it is proven you seized it unjustly, restitution will be made. That is our decree." Jon considered. "A traveling court. I've read of kings who did that in older times, moving from castle to castle so none felt neglected. It might unify us, or it might strain resources, but it's an idea worth entertaining." She nodded, then stilled, hearing a distant clamor from the yard below. Shouts rose, soon followed by the clang of steel. They exchanged alarmed glances and hurried along the rampart stairs, descending into the courtyard. Guards were rushing from all sides, spears and swords in hand. A swirl of confusion parted to reveal a man pinned to the ground by two Unsullied. Another man lay beside him, stabbed in the ribs, bleeding. Tyrion rushed up, breathless, followed by Grey Worm. "Someone attacked one of the Dornish delegates," Tyrion panted. "We're trying to figure out what happened." Lady Nymella arrived, flanked by her own men, fury etched on her face. The pinned man wore a half-shredded tunic with a lion sigil, clearly a Lannister loyalist, or at least trying to appear so. He spat curses in the direction of the Dornish. The wounded man on the ground wore Dornish colors, moaning in pain as blood seeped into the dusty ground. Daenerys' heart pounded. "What is this? Why attack a Dornish envoy? Stand aside." She gestured to the Unsullied, who parted, though they kept the attacker pinned. One of them wrenched a dagger from his hand, fresh with the Dornishman's blood. The pinned man snarled, "I'll not let you hand this city over to Dornish filth. The lion will rise again." He coughed, eyes rolling. "You Targaryens think you can wipe out House Lannister? There are still those who remember the old days. We will not bend." Jon exchanged a troubled glance with Daenerys, another sign of simmering loyalties. Tyrion's face hardened, as though hearing the rotted echoes of his family's name. Lady Nymella stepped forward, her voice sharp as a blade. "This is what we feared. Our men are not safe in this city while Lannister partisans roam free." Daenerys raised her hand in a calming gesture. "We will see justice served. This man attempted murder. Indeed, he may have succeeded if the victim dies. He'll stand trial or face summary punishment for harming a diplomatic guest. Nymella's eyes blazed. We want him. Let Dornish justice handle him. He spilled Dornish blood, not just city blood. Tyrion urged caution, stepping between them. My lady, if we hand him over, your people might exact vengeance rather than a fair trial. The city watch is better equipped, but the man pinned to the ground spat. Dornish scum! I'd do it again, given the chance. He tried to lunge, but the Unsullied held him fast. Jon saw the tension. If they refused to hand him to Dorne, Nymella would resent it, claiming the monarchy protected Lannister loyalists. If they complied, it might appear the monarchy condoned Dornish vengeance. Either path risked unrest. Daenerys realized the same. She drew herself up, speaking in a measured tone. We will hold him in the Red Keep cells. The trial will be presided over by a royal judge and a Dornish representative. That ensures impartiality. If found guilty, which seems likely, he faces execution or life in the cells. That is final. Nymella's anger flared, but she sensed there was little else to be done. She lifted her chin. Very well, but let it be swift. My man lies dying. Jon knelt by the wounded Dornish soldier, pressing a hand to the wound. A hush fell as he saw the severity. We need a maester now, he barked. A guard sprinted off. The soldier's eyes fluttered, blood dribbling from his lips. Grey Worm stood near, expression grim. He might not live, Jon muttered softly to Daenerys as he rose. Daenerys glared at the attacker. Take him away, she ordered the Unsullied. They dragged him off, kicking and cursing. Then she addressed Nymella. We will do everything possible to save your man. If he dies, I promise justice. The monarchy will not tolerate such violence in our capital. Nymella nodded curtly, her face pale with anger. Thank you, your grace. In the hours that followed, the courtyard tension barely subsided. The wounded Dornishman was carried to the maester's chamber. Lady Nymella's retinue bristled with hostility, glaring at any perceived Lannister loyalist. Tyrion tried to calm them, but he felt the weight of his name biting at him again. Daenerys and Jon recognized that the slightest spark could inflame the city. The man who launched the attack might not be a lone fanatic. For all they knew, a clandestine network of Lannister partisans lingered, funded by gold from Essos, as rumor suggested. They convened a crisis meeting in the same office as before. Grey Worm proposed a thorough crackdown, door-to-door searches for hidden arms, arrests of known Lannister sympathizers. Tyrion warned that such harsh measures might provoke more unrest, feeding the narrative that Targaryens were persecuting anyone who once served House Lannister. Daenerys sat at the head of the table, massaging her temples, listening to arguments. Jon eventually interjected, We must do something. We can't allow open violence against envoys. But let's be precise. Target those who are confirmed to plan violence, seize weapons caches if discovered, and publicly reaffirm that House Lannister is no longer outlawed, but acts of terrorism or murder are. Many who served the Lannisters accepted our rule quietly. We can't punish them all. Tyrion nodded, grateful for a balanced approach. Yes, that could work. Let's put a bounty on leads to smuggled arms or conspiracies. If someone tips us off, we reward them. We make it clear we'll punish violent rebellion, but we won't hound every Lannister retainer. Let them see the difference between justice and blind retribution. Daenerys agreed, giving Grey Worm a firm look. Enact these measures carefully. We do not want the city feeling we've become oppressors. Meanwhile, we should also check with the Watchers on the coast. Maybe some of these arms are being smuggled in. Tyrion, ensure the harbor levy includes inspections of cargo for contraband. Grey Worm bowed. It will be done. The next days passed in an uneasy hush. City watch patrols increased, Unsullied quietly searching suspected dens. Tyrion posted notices. Any who threatened foreign envoys or spilled blood in the streets would face swift justice. Rumors spread that the monarchy was on high alert, but for a time no further violence erupted. The Dornish soldier lingered between life and death. Lady Nymella seethed. Daenerys and Jon juggled finances, negotiations, and incessant pleas for assistance from all corners of the realm. The city braced like a tensed muscle, unsure if it would snap or relax. At intervals, ravens arrived from across Westeros. Sansa wrote from Winterfell. The north continued to recover, though restless voices questioned Jon's absence. Davos wrote from the Reach. They would send grain shipments soon, but local lords wanted strong assurances that bandits would be suppressed. Gendry at Storm's End reported mixed success. Some lords pledged loyalty, others expressed fear that Targaryen dragons might overshadow them. Yara Greyjoy promised vigilance at sea. Thus far, no sign of Euron, but rumors circulated of pirate gatherings in the Basilisk Isles or near the Stepstones. The monarchy's hold was real yet fragile, tethered by oaths and uncertainty. Meanwhile, the Black Dragons, Drogon and Umbrax, remained in the fields, a physical reminder that power need not always roost upon the keep's towers. A week after Daenerys and Jon's return, an unexpected arrival rattled the city. An Iron Bank envoy from Braavos. A slender man named Reginald Hather came with a retinue, carrying an elaborate ledger. He bowed politely before Daenerys and Jon in the partially rebuilt hall, explaining that the Iron Bank had heard rumor of the monarchy's potential financial troubles. He extended an offer of a loan large enough to fund watchers, rebuild the keep, and settle the crown's debts with relative ease. The interest rates, of course, were substantial. Tyrion eyed the Braavosi man warily. Why such generosity? The Iron Bank is rarely so quick to lend unless it sees profit or strategic advantage. Our treasury might be low, but we're not desperate enough for crippling interest. Hather smiled with all the slick confidence of a seasoned financier. The Iron Bank invests in stability, my lord. The realm has suffered from upheavals: Robert's Rebellion, the War of the Five Kings, the Great War, the overthrow of House Lannister. Lending you the coin you need to rebuild ensures Westeros remains stable, thus ensuring our future profits. We offer a path to swift prosperity, if you accept the terms. Daenerys and Jon exchanged a look. She asked, "And if we do not accept?" Hather's smile thinned. "Then we wish you well, but the realm will rebuild more slowly. Perhaps other powers in Essos will see an opportunity to fill the void. The Iron Bank invests where returns are certain." Daenerys's eyes flashed. "We do not bow to foreign profiteers. The bank used to lend to Cersei if memory serves. She defaulted. The bank seldom invests in the same losing side twice." Hather's composure remained unruffled. "We follow the money, your grace. House Lannister's default cost us dearly, yes. We see in you a better chance for a stable realm and stable returns. We are, however, not a charity. We would require assurances. Custom duties from your major ports, or a share in the revenue from newly discovered gold or silver, if any. Perhaps we could also secure half the taxes from Dorne's re-established trade route." Tyrion snorted. "There's the catch: stripping half the realm's wealth over time. We'd trade one form of tyranny for another." Hather inclined his head. "You remain free to decline, but consider carefully the cost of refusing. The crown is short on funds. The watchers need pay. The city begs for restoration. The Iron Bank can grant you swift relief. Is that not the will of the people?" The tension in the room thickened. Jon broke the silence, speaking evenly. "We appreciate your offer, but we need time to deliberate. We will not sign any contract without thorough scrutiny of the terms." Hather bowed, unoffended. "Of course, I will remain in King's Landing for a fortnight. Send word when you are prepared to discuss further." He departed with a flourish, leaving the monarchy's council to wrestle with the devil's bargain. After he was gone, Grey Worm eyed Daenerys. "We should be wary. Borrowing so much gold might let us pay soldiers now, but chain us in the future." Daenerys rubbed her temples. "Agreed. But if we do not find funds soon, the Watcher's loyalty frays, and opportunists move in. Our new tax might suffice, but it's slow. The city's merchants grumble. They can't bear heavier levies." Jon stared out the nearest window. "We should consider another approach, the Westerlands. If Tyrion is willing, or if we dispatch someone else, maybe we can reclaim old Lannister assets. The Rock might be tapped out, but there could be hidden stashes. Tywin Lannister was cunning. He might have stored wealth in secret vaults. Tyrion grimaced. I loathe returning to Casterly Rock, but if it helps the realm, I'll do it. The worst that happens is I confirm the mines are empty. If there is any hidden gold, I'd find it quickly. I know the old keeps and passages. I can leave soon if that's your command. Daenerys and Jon exchanged looks. Finally, Daenerys nodded. Yes, we'll try that before we kneel to the Iron Bank. Tyrion, gather a small company you trust. Travel to Casterly Rock. Check for hidden wealth or stockpiles. Return quickly. Meanwhile, we'll stall the Braavosi envoy. Tyrion bowed stiffly. As you wish. I'll set out on the morrow. Wish me luck rummaging through my family's dusty crypts. That night, the keep felt emptier as Tyrion packed for his journey. Lady Nymella remained on edge, her wounded guard still clinging to life. The man who stabbed him awaited trial in the cells. Jon prowled the corridors, checking on watchers, noticing how each hallway still wore scars of battle. Daenerys paced the half-rebuilt ramparts, half wishing she could mount Drogon and fly far from these problems. But flight would not solve anything. Days passed in a tense routine. The monarchy juggled minor crises. The Watchers arrested a handful of Lannister loyalists found hoarding weapons, though no direct link to Euron or Essos gold appeared. The city breathed but did not relax. Meanwhile, dispatches from Davos indicated the grain shipments were on the way, which was at least some good news for feeding the capital. Bran's occasional raven from King's Landing no longer arrived. He seemed to have gone silent, or else was lost in his visions. Arya had likewise vanished from mention, though rumor said she was quietly investigating threats in the city's underbelly. A week after Tyrion's departure, the distant roar of dragons signaled that Drogon and Umbrax had returned to the city's outskirts. Daenerys and Jon found them perched on a slope near the Rose Road, devouring fresh livestock from a wagon that had presumably been sent to feed them. Daenerys approached Drogon with cautious affection, petting his scaled neck. Jon stroked Umbrax's immense flank, feeling the ancient beast's heat radiate through his gloves. The black dragon's golden eyes regarded him with an inscrutable intelligence. Sometimes Jon felt Umbrax understood more than any mere animal should. If Bran's warnings were right, Umbrax was no simple creature of mortal days. But for now, the dragon accepted Jon's guidance, docile enough to refrain from incinerating passing travelers. They soared together above the city, continuing their daily show of presence. A reminder that Targaryen rule was not to be challenged lightly. People in the streets gaped at the sight. Some held up small children to see the dragons pass. Others cowered in doorways, memories of dragonfire still raw. Once they had circled, they landed outside the gates, mindful of not repeating the intimidation of roosting in the keep. Daenerys dismounted, a swirl of dust rising around her boots. She inhaled deeply, scanning the walls. Just then, a messenger on horseback galloped from the city, dismounting breathlessly at the roadside. "Your Graces," he panted. "News from the harbor. A Braavosi ship arrived bearing a red priestess. She requests an audience with you at once." Speaking of prophecy and fire, she claims an urgent message for the Targaryen rulers. Daenerys and Jon exchanged an alarmed glance. The memory of Bran's warnings about a red priestess in Essos came rushing back. Jon turned to Daenerys. "We suspected this might happen." Her jaw tightened. "We did. Let's see what this one wants. Summon her to the keep, under watch." The messenger bowed. "She's waiting by the harbor. She calls herself Zahara of Volantis. She has a retinue of priests and guards." Daenerys looked at Jon. "Ready a suitable guard. Let her come. But we'll not let her roam free until we know her intent." So it was arranged. By late afternoon, a small procession of red-robed figures wound its way up from the harbor, escorted by Unsullied. The group wore the symbols of R'hllor, pendants shaped like flames, staves topped by shining crystals. At the center walked a tall woman with dusky skin, piercing eyes, and hair braided with copper rings. She exuded an otherworldly confidence, as if each step carried the weight of prophecy. Her attendants, a mix of men and women, chanted under their breath, the same half-sung prayers heard once in Meereen. City folk watched from behind corners, unsettled. Most had never seen such a display. They arrived in the refurbished hall, where Daenerys and Jon waited upon a raised platform. Grey Worm and the Unsullied lined the sides, spears at attention. The Red Priestess, Zahara, inclined her head. "I come from the Temple of the Lord of Light in Volantis," she began, her voice resonant. "I bring greetings to Daenerys Stormborn and Aegon Targaryen, those who ended the Great Night. The flame reveals many secrets, and it has revealed a threat rising across the sea. I believe you, as the chosen of the Lord of Light, must heed the call." Daenerys's expression was wary. She recalled how another Red Priestess in Essos had once claimed she was the promised savior. "Speak plainly, Zahara. What threat do you warn of?" Zahara's dark eyes flicked to Umbrax's location in the field beyond, as though she could sense him even through the stone walls. "Shadows gather in the far east. An artifact of ancient power, once belonging to a lost empire, has been unearthed. There are those who seek to harness it to raise armies of darkness, perhaps not the whites you faced, but horrors of another kind. My visions suggest a connection to the old Valyrian magics. The surge of energy from your black dragon's awakening stirred the ashes of the past." Jon frowned. "Valyria is long ruined. We have been there. Nothing but curses and disease remain." Zahara nodded. "Indeed, but not all curses stay dormant. You, Aegon Targaryen, brought forth an ancient dragon from that ruin. It sent ripples across the magical currents of the world. Others felt it across the seas. Now they search for relics that might allow them to command monstrous things. I see Euron Greyjoy in glimpses, cavorting with these sorcerers. If he obtains a piece of that power, he could threaten Westeros anew with a fleet of horrors, or open the realm to worse fates." Daenerys tightened her grip on the armrest of her seat. "You speak of unimaginable dangers with little proof. Why come here? If this threat is real, can't your temple handle it?" Zahara's gaze never wavered. "Our temple stands watch, but we cannot cross the sea in force. We are pilgrims, servants of the flame. Only you, who tamed the Black Dragon and ended the White Walkers, can stand against the new darkness. My counsel is that you be ready. Perhaps in time you must sail east or fortify your shores. I bring this warning because the flames do not lie. The world's fate once again may hinge on your choices." A hush fell. Grey Worm's jaw clenched. Daenerys and Jon exchanged uneasy looks, recalling Bran's cryptic words about desert shadows and an awakened power. The possibility that Euron or others might harness ancient magic set alarm bells ringing in Jon's mind. Finally, Daenerys spoke. "If your prophecy is true, what do you suggest? We cannot simply sail our armies to Essos on rumor." Zahara's expression was calm, almost serene. "Prepare. Watch the seas. If the darkness stirs, it may test your defenses or try to draw you east. Have your dragons ready, for they are the key. If you wait too long, a new doom might come to these shores. The flame shows only possibilities, not certainties. But heed this, your black dragon, Umbrax, resonates with the same energies they seek to harness. That alone might draw them here." Jon tensed. "We won't let them take him. Umbrax is not a tool for sorcerers." The priestess inclined her head. "Then keep him safe. Keep your realm safe. If you require our aid, we will remain here for a time, offering blessings and guidance. Or we can depart if you prefer. But I pray you will not dismiss the Lord of Light's warning." Daenerys studied the woman's unwavering gaze. In her earlier days, she had welcomed the Red Priests who praised her as the breaker of chains. But Melisandre's involvement with Stannis had ended in tragedy. Prophecy could be a double-edged sword. "I do not dismiss your words," Daenerys said carefully. "But we do not serve R'hllor. We serve the realm. If your counsel helps protect our people, we'll consider it. If we find your presence sows discord, we'll ask you to leave." Zahara nodded, unoffended. "Understood, Your Grace. We serve the realm's best interests, for the night is dark and full of terrors." I will remain near the harbor, should you have need." With that, the priestess and her retinue left, their red robes swirling in the lamplight. Daenerys turned to Jon, exhaling shakily. "It aligns with Bran's warnings. We can't ignore it. Yet if we lose ourselves chasing doom across the sea, we might neglect the realm's immediate needs here." Jon set a hand on her shoulder. "We remain vigilant. We're not powerless. Even if Euron is part of some dark alliance, we have dragons, we have armies, we have knowledge of how to fight magic. Let's consult with Bran more directly, if we can find him." Grey Worm cleared his throat. "Shall I place watchers on this priestess and her followers?" Daenerys nodded. "Yes, they might be harmless, or they might stir trouble. Keep them under gentle observation." She said she'd remain near the harbor. "Make sure that's true. If they cause no problems, we leave them be. If they try to incite the people, we respond." So began a new layer of tension in the city. A red priestess speaking of dire threats from Essos, Euron rumored to be allied with unknown sorcerers, Tyrion gone to Casterly Rock in search of gold. The monarchy's knights grew restless. Lady Nymella pressed for word on her wounded guard, who still clung to life but had not awakened, leaving her thirsting for justice. The city's watchers discovered more hidden caches of contraband, daggers, old Lannister banners, possible smuggling lines. Fights broke out in taverns between Dornish men and Lannister loyalists. Daenerys and Jon did what they could to quell the unrest, dispatching new laws, holding public addresses, and occasionally letting Drogon and Umbrax fly overhead just to remind everyone that the monarchy was present. A fortnight after Tyrion's departure, a raven arrived from the Westerlands. It was short, penned by Tyrion's own hand. "To their graces Daenerys Targaryen and Aegon Targaryen. Casterly Rock yields little in gold. The mines are indeed all but spent. However, I have discovered partial evidence of a hidden stash my father once kept. It may lie in an abandoned stronghold near the sea cliffs west of Lannisport. I go there tomorrow with a small escort. With luck, I'll find enough to fill the crown's coffers for a time. If not, well, let's hope the Iron Bank's terms have softened. Wish me fortune. If I do not return within a week, send search parties." Tyrion. Daenerys set the letter aside, brow creased. "He's taking a risk. If Lannister loyalists remain in the Westerlands, they may see him as a traitor. Or worse, Euron might lurk in that region." Jon rubbed at his jaw. "Tyrion's resourceful, but we can't ignore the chance he could be ambushed. Do we send men to protect him?" Daenerys considered. "We can't spare many. The city is tense. If we send a large force, it looks like we aim to conquer the Westerlands anew. Let's wait for his next raven. If none comes, we'll act." So they waited anxiously. Days bled into nights. Daenerys stood on the keep's parapets, watching the smoke from the city's chimneys coil upward, wondering if a single spark of rebellion might ignite a new war. Jon roamed the Watchers' lines, ensuring discipline. The Red Priestess Zahara preached quietly at the harbor, drawing curious small folk with talk of a new darkness rising. Some found comfort in her words, praising Daenerys as the savior who would again banish evil. Others mocked the fire worshippers or spat that they'd brought ill omens. On the 6th day after Tyrion's letter, the weather shifted. Gray clouds massed over King's Landing, rolling in from the sea. Rain began to fall in cold sheets, turning roads to slick mud. Daenerys peered out a window as thunder growled. The courtyard emptied, workers seeking shelter. The subdued city now felt gloomier than ever. As evening descended, the gates opened, letting in a small party of riders, cloaked against the downpour. An eagle-eyed watchman shouted that the returning group carried the Lannister lion and a white flag of peace. Daenerys and Jon rushed to the keep's entry hall, hearts pounding. Was it Tyrion or someone else? They arrived to find half a dozen men slumped in the hall, soaked through. Among them, Tyrion, pale, shivering, hair plastered to his face. He leaned heavily on the arm of a disheveled knight. Blood stained the leg of his trousers, and a makeshift bandage wrapped his thigh. He forced a wry grin upon seeing Daenerys and Jon. "I made it," he rasped, voice tight with pain. but not unscathed. The stash was real, though not as large as I'd hoped. And we ran into trouble. Lannister loyalists in the hills. They attacked us. I barely escaped. Jon signaled for a maester, who scurried forward. What about your men? Tyrion's face twisted with regret. For dead, including the guide who led me to the stronghold. The rest of us fled with a portion of gold we managed to carry. There's more left hidden, but we couldn't hold out against the ambush. It seems these loyalists have sworn fealty to a figure calling himself the Golden Storm. Likely Euron, though I saw no banner with a kraken. He wields some strange symbol, gold and swirling lines. Daenerys tried to steady her voice. Did you see Euron personally? Tyrion shook his head. No, but the men boasted of a new master who would reclaim the Westerlands for Lannister and Greyjoy. They had unusual weaponry, blades etched with odd runes. I'm no maester, but they looked unnatural. One of them struck me, left a burning sensation in my leg that the maester's poultice only partially eased. He winced as the maester carefully examined the bandage. I fear it might be some dark forging from across the sea. Grey Worm stepped forward, fists clenched. They must be destroyed before they gather strength. The Westerlands cannot become a new fortress for rebellion. Jon placed a hand on Tyrion's shoulder, voice grim. We'll see you tended, my friend. Then we'll discuss the next move. Do we have enough gold to stave off crisis? Tyrion managed a weary nod. Yes, it's not a fortune, but enough to pay watchers for a few months, plus some left for reconstruction. The wagons are at the city gates, guarded by what remains of my men. A harsh cough seized him. I'd advise we keep it hidden until we can publicly account for it, so no new conspirators try to steal it. Daenerys' face hardened as she absorbed the news. So Euron's men roam the Westerlands, forging alliances with Lannister holdouts, using arcane weapons. The threat we feared grows real. If we let them fester, they might unify enough to challenge the crown. Grey Worm placed a hand on his sword hilt. We march west, crush them. Jon shook his head. We must be cautious. We can't leave the city undefended. Nor can we repeat the mistakes of the War of the Five Kings, scattering armies across the land. We might need a targeted strike. Send a loyal commander with enough forces to root them out. Or, we handle it with dragons, swiftly. Tyrion, still wincing under the maester's ministrations, managed a dry laugh. Cersei always said a dragon is the surest way to break rebellious lords. But we risk turning the Westerlands into scorched ruins if we're not careful. His eyes flicked up at Daenerys. We also can't ignore that new magic might be at play. If Euron has truly allied with some twisted sorcerers, they might have ways to wound or ward off dragons. I saw no direct sign of that, but my leg burn suggests unnatural forging. Daenerys thought of Zahara's warning that relics from Valyria or older empires might fall into the wrong hands. She closed her eyes briefly, feeling the swirl of responsibilities pulling at her from every direction. The city, the Watchers, Dorne, now the Westerlands' infiltration, a possible new wave of dark magic. We must plan carefully. For now, let's secure you. We'll examine those runic blades if we can retrieve them from the dead. Then we'll form a response. If it's Euron, we'll not let him run free. Jon guided Tyrion to a resting chamber while the maester prepared to treat his wound properly. Grey Worm ordered fresh watchers to guard the gold wagons. Daenerys, standing in the hall, pressed her hand against the cool stone, remembering the Night King's invasion, the fear that once consumed them. Now a different shadow rose. She recalled the prophecy-like words from Zahara. Magic answers magic. Had they, by awakening Umbrax, triggered a new cascade of supernatural threats? She felt a chill beneath her skin. For that night, the city lay under torrential rain. Streets turned into rivers of mud, thunder rumbling overhead. Lightning illuminated the battered towers of the keep. Daenerys, alone in her chamber, found sleep elusive. She paced near the window, worrying about how to address the next crisis. Tormund, in the city with a small group of free folk, might be a candidate to lead a mission west. He was fearless, if unorthodox, and had no stake in the old feudal grudges. Or perhaps a better-known knight would be needed. As her thoughts churned, she found herself longing for Yora's steady counsel. But he was gone, lost beyond the wall of death. She thought of Jon, who likely felt the same burden. Their union, formal or not, had not spared them from the realm's endless strife. Perhaps she should quell the rebellious lords once and for all with a swift show of dragonfire. But that was the old way, the path that might lead her down darker roads. She would not become the queen who burned every threat to ashes. A flash of lightning revealed an outline at her chamber door, a figure. She startled, only to see Jon, drenched from the rain, face taut with concern. "Couldn't sleep," he murmured. "Mind if I come in?" She exhaled, stepping aside. "You're soaked." He shook water from his hair, shutting the door behind him. "Needed a walk to clear my head." It didn't help. She guided him closer to the hearth, adding wood to coax more heat. They settled side by side on a small couch, silent but understanding. The storm outside rattled shutters and moaned against the walls. Ghost, dripping wet, padded in behind Jon, lay down with a heavy sigh. After a moment, Jon spoke in a low voice. "We've faced the dead. We toppled Cersei, yet peace eludes us. Part of me wonders if we'll ever have it. Maybe that's not how the world works." Daenerys leaned her head on his shoulder. "There must be a path. We see glimpses of it. Feeding the city, forging alliances, letting people live without terror. But each day brings a new threat. I suppose all we can do is meet them as they come." Her hand found his, fingers intertwining in the low firelight. "We do it together, Jon. That's the only way I find strength." He squeezed her hand gently. "Aye, together." Outside, the storm raged, as if echoing the turbulence in the realm. Euron's shadow creeped closer, rumors of sorcery swirled. The Westerlands seethed with rebellion, and the Red Priestess's cryptic warnings of an ancient doom hung in the air. Yet for that one moment, Daenerys and Jon found a sliver of solace. They had each other, and they had a realm that, despite all fears, clung to hope in the wake of the long night. They gazed at the dancing flames, letting the storm's roar fade to a distant rumble. The night was dark, the challenges many, but they had endured worse. Soon dawn would come. The wheel, half-shattered, might spin again, but they would continue breaking it piece by piece. The dragons waited just beyond the walls, and the future, uncertain yet salvageable, waited with them.